So as introduced, I spent 20 years at IBM Research doing AI research. So I built my first smart assistant back in 2007, was building recommendation systems in 2006, semantic analysis systems in 2009. So I spent a lot of time in this space. Later in my time, and the lady from Cisco, it resonated with me because I spent a lot of time building AI for collaboration systems. So how can we build recommendation systems or smart assistants to help people be better? How can we recommend what they need to do, who they need to talk to? How can we recognize expertise? How can we match expertise? How can we recognize organizational dysfunction, organizational efficiency? So a lot of stuff around people and how they work. And one of the things that there's many things I learned during that time, but there's two things. One is obviously AI is only as good as the data that feeds it, and we know garbage in, garbage out. Everybody knows that. But the other thing is that for AI to be good, it has to be personal. And actually, I think it was the lady in healthcare, it really resonated with me when she talked about the patient data. Because any generic healthcare algorithm or recommendation system or healthcare system, I spent about 3-4 years in healthcare research in AI for healthcare back in the mid-2000s. It has to know who the person is. It has to not just know who they are, but it has to be timely, so it has to be contextual. So I got really interested in the ethics of AI, because if we imagine a future where we want AI not just to know everything about the world, but everything about me, that raises some really, really significant ethical concerns. So I really got interested in the ethics of AI and also the future of a data economy where it's all about personal data and how can we create it equitably, safely, and securely. So this is why I sort of got into this new decentralized movement around looking at data and looking at wallet technologies and their role in digital transformations, of which AI is a critical part. So that's the preamble. So the question I wanted to kind of discuss today is, how can we realize a future where AI is our friend, where it can help us safely navigate a complex, interconnected digital world? I don't think any of us here are naive enough to assume that AI is not a double-edged sword. While it has the potential to save somebody's life, it has the potential to destroy their lives as well. And the reality is, all things being equal, there's a much higher likelihood of it doing bad than doing good if we don't take time, if we don't pause. This is absolutely not an area where we want to move fast and break things. So this is something where we really need to be thoughtful. And this is, so over the last about 7 years, I've been focused, I spent about 5 years in IBM Research doing this kind of work, and then I moved into Accenture. And the reason I moved into Accenture is that I wanted to make this type of technology mainstream. And where is a better place to make it mainstream than did you know that there's 800,000 people in Accenture? 800,000. It's like a country. But it basically works with all the big companies in the world. It works with governments. So it really gives an opportunity for me to go into organizations and really, really help try to make this idea of ethical, secure, privacy-preserving, people-centric AI and digital transformation a reality. So the dark cloud, and I just touched on it there. The future of AI is going to be personal and it's going to be contextual, and it's going to need, and this always freaks people out, but it's going to need the frictionless flow of personal data across both physical and digital touchpoints. And this is really scary because we think there's a lot of points right now where we share personal information inadvertently or otherwise, caching in browsers or whatever. But just imagine a world where every single door I walk through might be verifying my identity so I can get access. Every time I buy a drink, not for me, I'm too loud, but some of you young guys in the room, every time you want to buy some alcohol and you need to prove your age, it could be slurping up personal identity data. The risk of this going royally bad is very, very high. So what we really need to think about, a world where we really, it's not about making it frictionless, but in a secure and safe way. And that's really why I get up in the morning. So, stating the obvious, but trust and transparency must be the foundation of our digital future. And what I mean, trust, obvious, but what I mean about transparency is, as an individual, I need to know what data I'm sharing, I need to know why I'm sharing it, I need to know what's going to happen with that data. I know that's a lot of information, and the challenge is how can we ensure somebody has that level of transparency, they understand, without overwhelming them. So these big consent documents, which are 50-page long, so that nobody understands what they're consenting to, is not really informed consent, let's be honest. So we really need to have that transparency. But also, on the other side, organizations. One of the big drivers, and the big reasons why this whole decentralized movement is really expanding, is because of the trust and transparency on the other side, organizations. There's huge amounts of, we have identity fraud, we have insurance fraud, we have healthcare fraud, we have theft. I mean, it's just a huge challenge. So companies don't trust the people who are across these digital interactions and even in physical interactions. So there's really a big trust gap also on the organization side. So both these things are really driving a focus around how can we ensure that we have greater trust in who is at the other side of a transaction or an interaction, be that a physical or a digital, and also how can there be a level of transparency or so that we really can kind of trust the information that's being exchanged. So these are just kind of three key things that we really focus on when we're looking at how humans interact with digital business process, physical business process, and organizations. Number one is empowering every citizen with their own data. I'm going to come back to the healthcare example earlier because having spent quite a bit of time in healthcare, but like one of the areas of research, and there's a lot of companies looking at that. Tim Berners-Lee, you're probably all familiar from the internet. He's been kind of instrumental in one startup that spun off looking at effectively personal data lakes. So when we think about it, everybody kind of, decade or 2 decades ago, we're all into data lakes. Now we're looking at personal data lakes, where I have all my data in a data lake in the cloud, and I can share that with organizations, with entities, with applications as I see fit, so setting up certain rules. The other thing is about the need to minimize data leakage at every digital touch point. I'm going to use the buying a drink as the analogy. So today, when I'm young, I'm in college and I want to go buy a beer, I may have to show my ID. I might show a night driving license, if you're in the US, tends to be, or some sort of ID to prove my age. And that's fine. Somebody looks at it, they remember, okay, yep, you're over 21 or over 18 in Ireland, and they'll give you the drink. They don't hold the data, it's not there. Now we're moving forward into a world where more of this is becoming data-driven. So we have, in the US, we have MDLs, mobile driver's licenses, that are increasingly being used as a form of ID. So now I can walk into the bar. When I walk into the bar, the door or the doorman can just quickly, with my either my watch or my phone with NFC, check to make sure that I'm over 21 so that I can get a drink. This transaction is ultimately sharing data that can be persisted and just slurped up by actors that are not being thoughtful about what happens to the data. Now, it turns out with the MDL, the good news in that space is that ISO developed a standard which is very specific about minimal disclosure, which means when I share the information that I'm over 21, if I'm going into a bar in the US with an MDL, it's not going to share any private information. The only thing it's going to share is the fact that this person is over 21. So these are the types of things we need to be thinking more of. It's the same kind of GDPR example of need to know. I only should ask for the information that I really need. And in that case, you don't need to know somebody's name or address or their driving license number. So these are really critical things. I would talking since we're in Europe. So the analogy in Europe, where in the US, obviously it's very fragmented, so it tends to be bottom-up, the states do things, and there isn't really a strong federal kind of mandate for a lot of these things. In Europe, it's obviously the opposite way around. So we have anybody who's familiar with the EIDAS regulation, so the new European Digital Identity Regulation, which becomes active the end of 2026, at which point every citizen, ourselves included, we will all be able to carry around, a wallet in our mobile device, which will have verifiable, trusted identity data issued by the government. If we want it, it's a choice thing, but we will have the option to have that. And even better again is the regulation will insist that by a year later, companies will have to accept it. So if I want to open up a bank account or I want to get a credit card or whatever, they will have to accept my digital identity that's in my wallet. So the view is to streamline a lot of business processes. So decentralized identity is reimagining trust in a connected world. The Linux Foundation recently, or maybe about a year ago, established decentralized trust as a major theme and a major initiative within the organization. And we're seeing this across the board. So what is decentralized identity, and why do I think it's so exciting and it's so important for us that are building AI systems, particularly any AI solutions, which I would argue is the majority of them, that interact with human beings and that do some sort of, either they're transforming or optimizing a business process, or they're providing recommendations, or they're doing something that interacts with the human that needs some personal information, even if it's only just an identity. What decentralized identity does, which is really exciting, is it basically shifts data to the edge. Anybody who came out of the IoT space, they're used to shifting data to the edge, which then brings, instead of LLMs, we might be looking at SLMs to the edge of the device. But what it does is it brings data to the edge and into the hands of the individual, effectively giving them agency over their own data. Now, why is this important? It's obviously important for the human, for the individual's perspective, because they have control over their own data. And when organizations want to interact or want to get some data, it might be to prove your age or prove your, in the case of like the TSA as an example, they just on May 6th or something introduced or went live Trust ID. One of the things that is a trusted form of ID is the mobile driver's license. When you go into the airport and you show you scan your driver's license or through NFC, they will then be able to verify that that's a trusted form of identity. So obviously it's good for the individual because it allows them to control their data, but it's also really, really, really good for organizations. And actually SMBs are probably, I don't do a lot of work with SMBs and Accenture, but I think SMBs are the big, big winners in this. Because what are the big problems today? The problems today is personal data tends to be siloed. It's held by these big hyperscalers, these big data companies. They hold your data, they control your data, and no matter what they say, oh, we'll give you back your data, they give it to you in blobs or CSV files, but really they control and manage your data. So if you, for example, wanted to take that data and use that for another purpose, you have very, very little ability to do that. So just imagine a world where you have complete control and agency over your data. And for example, the driving license one is fairly easy. The government issues you an MDL. An employer might issue you a proof of employment. A university might issue you your degree. You might get certifications. You start to get more and more information that describes you, the individual. Once you have that, you can share who you want to share it with. Nobody else owns that data. You control and you own and you manage your own data. So I think it's really empowering for an individual. It's also really, really empowering for small companies. That the biggest problem is access to data, particularly if you want to have things like personal data. Just one quick thing on how this works. So it works using a combination of biometrics and cryptography. But in a nutshell, where you have a driving license today, you have it a physical piece of paper. What you do in the MDL world is you issue the document, the driving license document, but it's cryptographically signed using your private key. And then that document is shipped to the individual's device. When a relying party wants to verify that data, they don't need to go back to the original data source. They don't need to go back to the DMV to check to see, is this a valid driving license? All they need to do is have access to the trust registry, and what the trust registry is a PKD, it's a public key directory. All they need to be able to do is retrieve the public key of that issuing organization. They do the cryptographic check to make sure that everything is good, the data hasn't been tampered with, it is exactly what it is. They can use biometrics if they want to check the visual of the person presenting the material. And they're good to go. So all the interactions happen on the edge of the network without any, what we call, phone home. So it really is highly privacy preserving. So this is what makes it really exciting. This has another really interesting side effect as well, is it creates what we think of as a data economy, or what we like to think of as the equitable data economy. And by that, what I mean is, I as an individual have my data. I can choose to share that with whomever I want to. Now, this is something which is still evolving. It's still not kind of fully baked yet. But what's really interesting is there's an increasing recognition of things like data providers. If you hold some really valuable data about an individual, and you issue that back to that individual so that they can control it, they can manage it, it's their data, and then it subsequently is consumed by a third party, what is the economic model? So it might be that you're a hospital, that you have really valuable information about an individual that you issue back to them, and they choose to share it with a pharmaceutical whatever, or maybe healthcare is a little bit of a tricky one, but it might be, for example, the DMV. So they issue a driving license, somebody to say they've got proof that they're qualified to drive, they don't have any points on their license. And then Hertz consume that because they want to really, really quickly check somebody's identity, check that they're valid driving so that they can go rent a car. And an insurance company might have the same scenario. What is the economic model? What should Hertz pay something back to the original data issuer? Because data is money, data is currency, data is oil, it has value. So there's really interesting value models and value exchange that's starting to build up. Banks are really interested in this, telcos are interested in this. We're even increasingly seeing governments, because while governments don't want to sell your data, they do recognize if they're going to provide us this amazing digital infrastructure, it's going to cost money. And why should I, as a taxpayer, pay the government to run infrastructure if the private sector could be paying for it? So there's some really interesting business models. If you don't believe me, believe the world. So I'm kind of making these sweeping statements about how I think the future is going to evolve and how I think decentralized identity is the future. But am I the only person, or is this a general consensus? And I think there's a general consensus, at least on the government side and increasingly on the private sector. Because if you think about this, this is kind of scary. This is like power to the people. We're letting people control and handle and manage their own data. But there is really real big benefits to businesses from doing that. For just a very simple example, simply just latency. I'm going to use COVID as an example. One of the big projects I worked on, so I was doing early research in this work, and I was working with the standards bodies and developing decentralized identity. And then COVID came along. As they say, it's a bad thing that doesn't have some good for somebody, because what this really did, COVID did, is it validated that decentralized identity worked, and it was the only scalable solution. Because what happened during COVID is I worked on the New York Accenture pass, and I built that system for them. But I know in Ireland, we had our COVID passes as well. That was a decentralized system. A COVID pass was a cryptographically signed document. When you went into a restaurant or bar and you scanned it, it was just basically verifying it on the edge, no data going up to a big, dark cloud in the sky. So it proved that it worked. When we did the New York project, so we had obviously millions of New Yorkers were getting vaccinations. They were getting their COVID passes. They were using them. Because everything happens on the edge of the network, it's massively scalable. Because if you just think, you're not having to ping up to a cloud server the whole time to verify data. So it scales really, really fast. It handles so the big challenge was things like football day on, was it Sunday or Saturday? The American in the room would know. But one day that the football, you'd have big peaks in terms of demand to verify identity or verify tickets, because people are going in to the sports stadiums. So the thing is, this scales really, really nicely. It's got very, very little latency because it's just peer-to-peer. So it really, really helps this concept of a digital society where you want things that are very high performance, very large scale, and very low latency. These are so this is a bit overwhelming, so I just want to throw this up there. Two things I guess I already touched on. One is in the US, we're seeing decentralized identity really showing up through the whole rollout of MDLs. About half of states in the US now have MDL programs under development, and the other half will have them within the next 3 years. So what we're going to see in the US, we'll see mobile driver's license becoming kind of a de facto digital identity for US citizens. There's other projects and other programs going on. For example, in the federal government, we see an increasing move towards looking to credentialize things like green cards, visa applications, things like that. In Europe, we see mainly it's around the EU Digital Identity Framework, EIDAS, and UK, we see the Trust Framework. Even in Australia and New Zealand, they've really, really engaged with this, and they've done a lot of work with starting to roll out decentralized identity to their citizens. So we're seeing this broadly rolling out across the world. And what we're also seeing is the open standards are starting to mature, which means this stuff is really ready for prime time. So, benefits. I've kind of touched on these already, but just to kind of call out, these are probably top 5 benefits, I would say, of decentralized identity. So one is that they're privacy preserving. Because the way the specs have been developed by the open standards community is that the idea of kind of either zero knowledge proof or selective disclosure or predicates is kind of built into the standard, which means that inherently it's built to be privacy preserving. This is really, really useful in many, many different use cases. It's also useful in scenarios where you, for example, might have selective, so incremental disclosure. So it might be that you're recruiting people and you're looking for people to apply for a job. And in the beginning, you maybe don't need to know a lot of information about them. You might not need to know their names for them to get an application form. But then as they go through the process, you want to disclose more and more information until eventually, before you're offering them a job, you want to obviously make sure you know their identity, you want to know their qualifications, you want to know their past employers. So you need to have a lot more credentialized and trusted and verifiable data. Wallet APIs. This is always an emotive topic, because when I talk to a lot of big companies, because what this does is it kind of breaks the whole, the last 20 years, enterprise APIs, the whole idea of these, cloud services, and that's all great. But wallet APIs basically allow you to avoid the spaghetti of enterprise APIs. So if you think about it, if, for example, I'm going to come back to the driving license because it's just a really easy example. So if I'm, for example, want to verify a driving license, today what I would have to do, somebody would show me the driving license. I would, maybe enter the information in. And then if I really, really want to verify it, I have to be a member. If I'm talking about the US at the moment, I have to be a member of AMVA. I'm assuming it's probably similar in Ireland. They have to be a member to get access to the DMV's endpoint. So you have to be a member, and then you get access to the enterprise service in the cloud, where you can then query to make sure that this is indeed a valid driving license, it indeed belongs to Marie Wallace, and there's no points on it. So what you're having to do is you're having to ping that to this enterprise endpoint. Now that's okay if digital credentials aren't being broadly adopted for a whole slew of things. But just imagine a driving license as an example. Today, it's not used by a lot of companies. I mean, it's not verified. There's not a lot of companies that want to really make sure it's the right thing. But now if you imagine every single bank, retailers, bars, car rental companies, they all want to be able to verify a driving license. Now, all of a sudden, you go from having maybe 50 companies that need access to your secure MDM system. Now you have 5,000 or 50,000, and they may be outside of the country, because if I have a driving license in Ireland and I'm traveling to the US, I need to be able to verify my driving license as a US citizen as an Irish citizen traveling in the US. So clearly, the only thing that scales is a decentralized approach, period. Nothing else scales. It's not going to work. No matter how many times we convince ourselves it will, it won't. So this wallet API idea is where essentially you've got the API of me, is the idea, and your wallet, your end device becomes the API for your data and for the verification. Peer-to-peer, I mentioned already. This gives a lot of, it's very robust, low latency, high performance, and it has web scale. Biometrics and cryptography. Obviously, the cryptography is in signing the credentials before they get sent to your wallet. The biometrics in areas where you need high LOA, high levels of assurance in the identity. Biometrics allows you to verify if there's a credential, like an identity credential, like a passport or driving license, which has an image in that will then allow you to verify the likeness of the image with the person that's sitting in front of the device, with things like liveness checking and that sort of stuff. And that's actually becoming really interesting. We're talking to some of the hyperscalers in the area of deep fakes and video. So this allows you to start to combat deep fakes. And then obviously open standards for interoperability. All this stuff is built on open standards 100%. And actually most of it is actually built on open source. If we look in Europe, there's a number of these open source projects that already have implementations of these wallets that are going to then be adopted by the governments by the end of 2026. So, I'm just looking at the clock. I want to make sure I'm on time. So just one final, and then I have a short video I wanted to share with you that is just an example of a project that we're doing with one of our clients that sort of tries to bring to life all the stuff I've been talking about. So I just wanted to back up what I've said with some data. We all like data. By 2026, so we're already there nearly, there'll be more than 500 million smartphone users will be regularly making verifiable claims. So a verifiable claim is like a verifiable presentation. An application sends a request to a wallet, asks you to prove something, and then you send the result back cryptographically signed, and it gets verified. So 500,000 smartphone users will be doing this regularly. I think a lot of that's probably impacted by MDL and by EIDAS. By 2030, the decentralized identity market is expected to reach 50 billion, and that's conservative. I saw one analyst that had projected by 2034 it's going to be 1.2 trillion. It's growing at about a 90% CAGR, so it's doubling in size every year as a market opportunity. Agentic AI, we all know agentic AI is growing. It's going to be a 50 billion, just about the same as the DI market, at about a 45% CAGR, so it's not growing as fast as DI. Mobile wallet market by 2034 is going to be about 104 billion, and that's growing at about 26%. And then finally, the SLM market. We all talk about LLMs. We work with some really interesting startups that are doing a lot of work around SLM, small language models, that you can deploy to the edge to actually run on a device. This is particularly useful for use cases where there's a level of sensitivity. So, for example, health data. I might want to basically get retail recommendations, or I might want to get offers from my retailer that might be informed by health data, but I don't want to share my health data with the retailer. And I can assure you, the retailer doesn't want you to share it because they don't want to be under the liability and the HIPAA requirements of holding health data. So there's lots of use cases where I would love to be able to use my data for getting some value-added service or for getting some personalized service, but I don't want to give that endpoint my data. So we're going to see more and more AI happening on the edge of the device. And with that, I'm just going to show you a small 2-minute video, which is an example of what we're doing with one of our clients. And there's no sound. Can we get sound? No? That's really unfortunate. Okay, well, what I'm going to do is, because it was actually a really good video, what I will do is, for anybody interested, what this is a travel use case where it just shows the whole world of travel and how this is going to be transformed by wallet technology. So we're doing with, say, for example, the cable companies. So just imagine I'm sitting in front of the TV and I'm seeing a really good movie, and there's a beautiful beach. And I want to know, God, where is that beach? Oh, God, I could really do with a beach holiday. You want to find out where that beach is. You want to be able to know, like, what are the special deals for that beach? How much would it cost to get? What are the flights? Do I need a visa? So just imagine where you can really, at in a second when you think of something, you can start to actually make it real. And that's the type of stuff that we're doing with a combination of agentic AI built into the wallet, along with personal information about you and a set of agentic services. So, for example, we're working with one of the world's largest immigration legal firms that's helping to streamline legal processes for immigrations. How can I really quickly just get whatever visa I need so I can go to that amazing beach on that amazing holiday? We're working with the travel companies and how I can streamline the booking and also the entire experience of going travel end to end. Because we all know travel is okay if everything goes perfectly. But if one thing goes wrong, if my flight is delayed by 30 minutes, all of a sudden it has this knock-on effect. So how can we make that process, easier with a combination of agentic AI and wallets? So if you're interested, come talk to me afterwards. I can share a URL, which will show you the video and also show you some more information about how this technology is evolving.